students. One of the classes I'm teaching to my undergraduate students does have a unit on hearing aids. And before they even learned about hearing aids at all, formally in the classroom, I made them get into small groups and get on their computers. And I told them, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's just beginning to have some hearing trouble. And I want you to get online, like you might for anything, and just start searching. Like, look for the information that you would look for if you were starting to experience this. And we talked for an entire class period about how overwhelming it can be and how to know what the right steps are and what you should be doing. So I fully sympathize and understand where a lot of people are coming from, especially now with this whole entirely new option. Okay, so especially age-related hearing loss, it's, not inevitable, but it is a very common thing as we all age. And what we do know is that, sorry, I'm fixing my screen here. There we go. About a third of people who are in the age range between 65 and 74 years old have some measurable amount of hearing loss. And once we get to age 75, we're talking almost about half of individuals have a measurable amount of hearing loss. And this could be due to just the normal aging process of our auditory system, or that coupled with your history, your hearing history. So some people have had medical things that contribute to hearing loss, like a lifetime of ear infections or ototoxic medications. So there are some medications that can impact your hearing and your ears. And of course, if you've ever either recreationally or through jobs had any noise exposure, that can also contribute. And so we know that there are quite a lot of people who have some hearing challenges. And the issue, though, is that when we have hearing loss, and if it's not treated, it can have some different consequences amongst different realms of our life. So on the left side of the screen here, this is more about how we live and how we navigate our world and live in a healthy manner, whatever we mean by healthy. But untreated hearing loss can lead to fatigue. So if you're trying to listen through a hearing loss that is not treated properly, by the end of the day, your brain just might be very fatigued. You might find yourself just exhausted after trying to be social. It can impact self-esteem. Absolutely. If you tend to be a pretty social person, or you pride yourself in your ability to communicate with others, and now this is changing, that can definitely have an impact on self-identity. But one thing we do know is that over time, untreated hearing loss, what happens is people start maybe communicating a little less during interactions. And then that leads to, well, maybe I'm not going to go to this particular event because I don't hear well in those environments and it's not pleasant for me. And then that leads to removing yourself from more interactions with others, can lead to isolation. And we do know that isolation can also lead to depression. So those are sort of our quality of life impacts of untreated hearing loss. But on the auditory system, there also are impacts. And so when you don't treat a hearing loss, you end up with something called auditory deprivation, which means that you're not sending sounds to the part of your brain that interprets sounds. And this can mostly show up as increased difficulty understanding speech from other people. But we also know that there's some research out there that can cause some cognitive declines as well. And this is not a fear-mongering tactic. We don't know that untreated hearing loss itself causes early cognitive decline, but what we do know is that there is a relationship that has been found, scientific evidence that shows individuals who have untreated hearing loss or improperly treated hearing loss often have early onset of dementia. And so they're kind of trying to disentangle that and figure out, what is that relationship? Why are we seeing this relationship occur so much? But it is there and it's real. One of the problems we come up with then is, if there are so many people with hearing loss in America, 48 million, and we know that not treating hearing loss properly can lead to all of those things we just talked about, it's a real problem. It's a real public health issue, because right now, only about a third of people with hearing loss who could benefit from hearing aids actually wear them. And that is an incredibly low number. And so you have 2/3 of those people at risk for all of those things I just talked about on the previous slide. On average, what we know, and actually some data just came out, it might be actually a little shorter than this now, but what we do know is that on average, people tend to wait from the time that they start having some hearing difficulties around 7 to 10 years before they take their first steps to get their hearing evaluated and do anything about it, which is 7 to 10 years more of putting yourself at risk for those issues on the previous slide. Some data that just recently came out says maybe it's a little closer to 6 years, which is good. That means people are being a little more proactive there, but still 6 years is quite a long time. And then there's been tons of research and people looking into, well, why does this happen? Why do we have so few people who could benefit from hearing aids, and we know the benefits? Why aren't they wearing them? And it's likely that there are several barriers, and everyone's circumstance is certainly different. But what we find to be the top 4 reasons why people don't do this, you won't be surprised by the first one. Most people say cost. Okay, the cost is too much. There is some stigma still attached to wearing hearing aids. I do have to say that I've been doing this since 2005. And just since then, I have seen such a reduction in the stigma of living with hearing loss and wearing any sort of device that can help your hearing. People are much more willing to embrace it. People talk about it a lot more. I don't know if it's just people being so much more familiar with technology as time goes on, or us learning that being advocates for our own health care is really beneficial. But whatever it is, it's a good thing, but we do start seeing the stigma reduced. Value, and so that's different than cost, right? So, okay, yes, they might have a certain cost associated with them, but once you take that step, are you worried about whether it'll be good, if it'll be worth it, right? What's the value of it? And then the last one, people just aren't really quite sure where to start. And so these are the things that are listed as the top main reasons why people are not getting hearing aids. And I'll come back to this, okay? Because we're going to talk about some of those things and things that are sort of we're trying to do to address those. Real quick, just one side note that I think is really interesting is that when we look at our counterparts in different countries that do have some healthcare systems that allow for the purchase of hearing aids, so individuals are not paying out of pocket for their hearing aids, it doesn't change. We still see only around a third, up to around like 40% of people, even if they don't have to pay out of pocket for hearing aids, only 40% of people are wearing them. So, we see cost a lot of times listed, and it's a very real thing. That is very real. But it's really interesting to consider that when cost is taken out of the equation, we still have a lower amount of people wearing hearing aids. And there's various reasons for that, but I just thought I'd put that out there. Okay, so one thing when we start talking about hearing aids and different devices for improving our ability to hear, we have to really make sure that we're establishing realistic expectations. So hearing aids cannot cure hearing loss. Sometimes hearing aids, the idea is that we use them as a tool. Okay, they're just one piece of trying to improve your hearing and your communication in situations. Okay, so while hearing aids can't cure hearing loss, the goal is to improve your hearing from your baseline to give you better access to being able to communicate and enjoy the things that you might enjoy, even if that is sitting in your living room by yourself watching a movie. Okay. It isn't always just about communication, but also things you enjoy and recreational situations. So the idea with technology, and I think some of this goes back to that value piece, right? People, when they pay a lot of money, very rightly so, expect to have stellar results from it. But the reality is these are tools. They're little tiny computers that are attempting to improve upon one of our senses. And so there are some limitations for sure. But the technology has gotten really great. And there's a lot of features available that really can address a lot of the concerns that most people have who have some hearing challenges. Okay, so that's just sort of like an intro piece of that. So then the question is, well, what do I do now? Right? How do I start this process? Or if you've already started this process, how do I know what I'm doing is the right thing for me? And are there other options? And the answer to that is there are so many options out there. Just like that little exercise I had my students do, if you just start to even investigate any of this, you'll start probably realizing, oh my gosh, there are so many things out there. I really am not even sure what to get. One of the things I talked about the last time I was here were traditional hearing aids, but we talked about these things that are amplifiers that you can get. You might see them online or advertised on TV, but I'm not going to talk about those so much. I'm going to stick to hearing aids today because we have this whole new category of hearing aids, legitimate hearing aids. And so I'm going to really kind of talk about the difference between the two and trying to figure out which avenue you might want to go down. So regardless of what your ultimate outcome is, your first step is making sure that you are getting a full hearing evaluation, a full diagnostic hearing evaluation. And I was so happy to see that almost everybody on here raised their hand when I asked you, have you ever gone and gotten a full diagnostic hearing evaluation? And that is incredible, fantastic. Well done, you all. And so that is the first step. Even if you are considering pursuing some of these over-the-counter hearing aid options, an updated hearing evaluation is the best thing to do. And the reason for that is it's not just checking how you hear things, but they're also going to check the health of your ear. So what we do during these tests are we check how different parts of the ear work. And is there anything there that's causing us any concern? We can also look for things like excessive wax or infection or other medical concerns that might be present. So there are quite a few medical things that can cause some hearing loss that we might be able to catch. Without giving away too much information or any protected health information, I actually just saw someone this week who had gone to get hearing aids from, I won't say where, but from a hearing instrument specialist, not an audiologist, which is fine. Hearing instrument specialists are trained to fit hearing aids. That's wonderful. This person had not gotten a full diagnostic hearing evaluation from an audiologist. And the reason that they came in was they wanted to know, were the hearing aids I was given the appropriate option? And I said, well, the first step of that, let's do a hearing evaluation. This person had a hole in their eardrum that was also contributing to a significantly worse hearing loss in one ear versus the other. but that was not caught because they hadn't had a full evaluation yet. So I sent them back where they got the hearing aids from, had them return them until they got addressed, everything got addressed medically, and then we'll start that process. You know, he can start that process again of now finding perhaps a more appropriate hearing aid solution. So that's one of the, I tell that story just because it just happened, but it's why we always recommend this. Plus it will give you an accurate idea of the level of your hearing loss or challenges. And then we will obviously see what can you hear and how do you understand speech, because being able to pick up sounds is a lot different than being able to pick up speech and processing that through up to the brain. So Diane, I keep picking on you because you're right at the top of my screen. Diane and I could go and get our hearing tested and see how we hear the beeps, right? And she and I could maybe perhaps have exactly the same ability to hear those beeps. But then when we test our speech understanding, if things are made loud enough, Diane understands 94% of the words and I understand 52%. So it isn't just about what can you hear, but how do you understand the sounds that you're hearing? And that is really important to understand before making choices with your hearing aids. And then after that, hopefully you can have a realistic conversation or at least make an educated decision about what are my hearing technology options then? Can I get over-the-counter hearing aids? Am I a candidate for those? Or am I not a candidate? And if I'm going to pursue hearing aids, should I be going more of the traditional prescriptive route? Or is there something else out there that's better for me? So I'll talk a little bit about prescription hearing aids. So our traditional, when we say prescription hearing aids, that is the new category by the FDA. That is their new name, prescription hearing aids. And those are the hearing aids that we have traditionally fit for a long time. So you need to go to a licensed hearing provider, whether it's an audiologist or a hearing instrument specialist, but they are licensed through the state to be able to dispense prescription hearing aids. Now, prescription hearing aids are wearable sound amplifying devices that are intended to compensate for impaired hearing, and therefore they are regulated by the FDA as a medical device. So the reason that this line is important is because the manufacturers who make these types of FDA regulated hearing aids, they have to comply with very, very specific regulations related to the design, the dispensing, and the use of the devices. So it's incredibly regulated. So if a hearing aid company says, our brand new hearing aid processes speech and noise 3 times faster than our old one, they actually have to show scientific proof of that. So they cannot claim that if they don't have evidence to back that up. Now, if something's not a prescription hearing aid or regulated by the FDA, it can just be any kind of a loudspeaker almost that someone can throw on the internet and say, oh, here's a hearing device. And that doesn't have to be regulated. So you want to be very careful to make sure that the language used is hearing aid. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that online, some people don't sort of falsely advertise what their device is, but at least this kind of gives you a little bit of an idea. So if you see funny language dancing around the term hearing aid, if you see hearing amplifier or hearing device or hearing prosthesis, I've seen that before. They use that language because they're not FDA regulated. Okay. Let's see. Oh, and the one thing with prescription hearing aids is there's usually a device out there that is for anybody who has, most degrees of hearing loss. It's pretty, there's a lot of options. And so if you have a very mild hearing loss or you have a very severe hearing loss, there's typically some kind of a prescription aid out there for you that can address your hearing needs. The hearing test, though, what I just talked about, that's only one part of figuring out what hearing aid is best for you. So the person that you talk with or consult with after the hearing evaluation should be talking to you about other things as well. It's not just how you hear, but how severe is the loss? How is your speech understanding, like I just talked about? Is it good enough to benefit from hearing aids? The reason I say that is if you get a hearing test and they evaluate your ability to understand speech and your ability to understand speech is very poor, hearing aids actually may not help you. That's when you would have to talk to them about some other options there. Or perhaps this is a way for us to help you develop realistic expectations. So if I use the example that I used before, where Diane has 98% speech understanding abilities, getting amplification through hearing aids means that she'll probably do pretty well with understanding what people are saying by using the hearing aids. But then if I go and I talk about hearing aids and I only have a 52% speech understanding ability when things are made loud enough for me, the conversation that should be had is, you could try hearing aids, but you should know that you are still probably going to have some difficulty understanding speech, even with the best hearing aids. Does that make sense? So it isn't just, one size fits all. Oh, I have hearing loss. Let's put some hearing aids on. It's going to help me hear better. But there should be some really honest conversations about what the expectations are. Should you still expect to have some struggles in certain situations? And everyone's going to be different. They should also be talking to you about whether you need 2 hearing aids versus 1. Typically, 2 hearing aids tends to be better if you do have hearing loss in both ears. There are some exceptions. But the reason we say that if you have hearing loss in both ears, that 2 hearing aids is better than 1 is that when you use 2 ears together, you don't have to use quite as much effort to understand speech and noise. It's this natural thing that happens that allows you to hear speech and background noise better when you're using 2 ears versus 1. Also, remember we talked about that auditory deprivation, about how when you're not getting sound up to the brain, what's happening is that you're depriving that part of the brain of input. When you have 2 hearing aids, now you're getting more stimulation to all of your auditory pathways that you wouldn't get if you only had 1. Okay, so that's sort of part of what should be happening before you even get a recommendation about whether you should pursue traditional hearing aids or over the counter. But the very last thing that should be discussed is that what we call it a needs assessment. And HCP means hearing care professional, just so you know. So you should get a needs assessment done. So, what kind of situations are you in particular having difficulty in? What are your goals? What are you trying to hear better? What are your needs? What features of a hearing aid are right for you? Should also be assessing your vision. Now, not doing a visual exam, but just asking you, do you have any difficulty seeing up close, small parts, anything like that? Do you have any manual dexterity concerns, or even not just manual, but any mobility concerns? Because if you have to reach up to put things on your ear, you're going to be able to do that. What is your lifestyle like and your activity level? Are you somebody who likes to go and be really social as much as you possibly can? Are you someone that has breakfast with your friends once a week, attends a place of worship? Do you like to go to the theater? Do you like to do are you working? Do you use the telephone? What kind of things do you like to do or need to do? Or are you someone who really values a very quiet lifestyle where most of your time is spent with just one or two other people, or perhaps mostly by yourself, but you still need some access to hearing things because you do have some social obligations, and whether that's even just a weekly phone call with a family member, or like I said before, watching your favorite movie on TV, right? So the needs for somebody in the first category are going to be a lot different than the needs for somebody in the second category. And if the person talking with you about getting hearing aids, the professional, isn't asking you these questions, then you should be going somewhere else, or you should push to have them talk about those things. And then after the hearing test, this needs assessment, figuring out what your speech understanding is, and of course, determining what might fit in your budget, then that can help to determine exactly what kind of hearing aid technology would be recommended and what features you need. So if you're kind of pursuing this and you don't have this conversation, then, you're not given the chance to really explore this the proper way. Another way to kind of also consider what your needs are when it comes to hearing devices is to ask, yourself, how am I hearing when there's noise present? So there are some formal tests that we can do for that when you come to get your hearing evaluated. But even if you don't get that kind of a test done, you should still be talking about your experiences, especially in background noise. There are quite a few hearing aid features out there that are designed to help in those situations. Now, some of them, you might talk to the person and say, I really don't want to have to change anything on my hearing aids. I want to put them in the morning and I don't want to think about them. And that would let the audiologist know that you want things made automatic as much as possible. Or if you're someone who really likes to fiddle with stuff and the sound, and you want some control over those things, then you might want to talk about getting some manual ability to manually change some of the settings on the hearing aids. You also probably want to make sure that you're discussing different features that are designed to help in background noise. And I've listed a few of those here. So there's some background noise reduction and certain kinds of microphones. And if you don't want to get into the weeds too much with technology, just tell them this is a situation I need help in, and then they can recommend a certain thing and tell you why. There are also some extra accessories that are available to go with the hearing aids. So if you're someone who has the type of hearing loss where you really struggle in background noise, sometimes the built-in features in a hearing aid they do well a lot of the time, but not all of the time. And you might need some extra accessories to help you out in those situations. Just so you know, some of these things that are out there are things like remote microphones, which are a device that you can put if let's say you're sitting at a table having a meal with someone in a little bit of a noisy restaurant. Your remote microphone might go across the table. You might just set it right in front of your dining partner and you can hear their voice a little bit better. There's different accessories out there. And so my point, I won't be able to cover all of them in here, but my point here is if you are considering traditional hearing aids, you need to be asking about those. What background noise features are available for me? And do my circumstances warrant any extra accessories I may need to help me to hear better in the situations in which I struggle? I'm just going to take a little sip of water. My throat's getting a little dry. Another thing to consider that you should be asking about are batteries. So which option is right for you? Disposable batteries are basically what most people think of when they think of hearing aid batteries. So you individually change these as needed. For most people, it's somewhere around once per week. And it's always so funny. And most of you, I mean, I have a lot of hearing aid wearers in here, so it might not be a surprise to you, but whenever I talk to people about this for the first time, they go, once a week? That's so frequent. I can't believe I have to change my batteries once a week. The reality of it is, though, is like I said before, you're kind of wearing tiny computers on your body all day long. And the thing powering them is what we see in this picture. They're very small, so once a week is actually pretty good. Another, some questions to ask regarding batteries, if you're going to be going for the traditional disposable, changeable type of batteries, is, does the price of the hearing aid package that I'm getting, does that include batteries? Or is that something that I need to evaluate as being a need for me to purchase on my own? It totally depends on where you're going. Some will include them and some don't. The pros, the good things about this type of battery is that if your battery dies, you put a new one in and you get immediate power. Okay, you're back up and running, you're online, just like that. And you don't need any access to a plug or a power source or anything like that. But a lot of people don't like them because it is an added expense and have trouble holding it, seeing it, being able to change it, and it doesn't allow them to be independent in their use of using hearing aids. Another option that's out there, though, now are rechargeable hearing aids. And so rechargeable hearing aids would be hearing aids you take off at the end of the day. You place them in a case type of thing usually, and they just charge. And so this would have to happen nightly, just like you have to do with a phone or something like that. Your rechargeable batteries should last you the entire day. I say should because if it's a really busy day for you and that hearing aid's working really hard and you're listening to music or you're on the phone a lot or you're in a very noisy environment, sometimes that can drain the battery a little bit faster, but most of them right now are lasting people for a full day. And so the good thing about rechargeable hearing aids is it is very good for people who have dexterity differences. And you don't have to purchase batteries separately. But the downfalls of rechargeable are that if your hearing aid runs low on battery and you are out and about and still needing to hear, you can't just put a battery in it and be back up and running, ready to go. You have to plug it in, get your charger, let them charge for a little while to get you enough power to keep going. All right. Almost done with the traditional hearing aid stuff, and then I'll get into the over-the-counter. Another one is you might want to consider, again, this kind of goes back to lifestyle, but do you need any that have extra water resistance built into them? Right? Some moisture resistance. Hearing aids, no matter what, are not waterproof. Okay. But a lot of them have water resistance technology built into them. So they can withstand, if you're outside and you get caught in a rainstorm or you're sweating profusely someday for some reason. But they're not going to really hold up to dunking your head underwater accidentally and swimming around with your hearing aids on. But if you're somebody who spends a lot of time outside in the summer and it's humid and you're gardening or you're doing something where you're sweating a lot or there's a lot of moisture in the air, then you might want to ask about what your options are about water resistance. There are also different things you can get that help with that. So there's different covers you can purchase for hearing aids that help them to keep moisture out. There are different humidifiers you can buy, little boxes that end up, pulling the moisture out of the hearing aids. Or you can just take them back into your audiology office and have them serviced, and they can help with that as well. So if this is a concern for you, definitely something to talk about. I think somebody still has their microphone unmuted. Another really kind of neat newer technology is Bluetooth capability. And when I tell people about this at first, they're like, oh no, I don't really need all of that kind of technology. I don't see a need for that. But the things that allows you to do, once you get the hang of it, are really, they really give you access to a lot more things. So most newer model traditional prescription hearing aids have the ability to directly connect wirelessly through Bluetooth to anything that has Bluetooth capability. So, for example, a phone, an iPad, or other kind of tablet, sometimes other Bluetooth enabled devices. But the reason you might want Bluetooth is there's two ways that we can use it. The first one is just connecting the hearing aid to your device, and it allows you to use the device to adjust your hearing aid. So let's say you do want the ability to change the volume of your hearing aid or how it sounds, but you're not comfortable with reaching up and making those changes on the hearing aids themselves. You can typically use your device, most often your phone. You pull up a screen and you can change the volume and the way the hearing aid sounds just by using the phone. And if that's all you need it for, that's great. But there's also what we call Bluetooth streaming. And Bluetooth streaming takes any audio from the device that you're connected to with the hearing aids, and it takes that audio and puts it directly into the hearing aid for a more direct sound. So let's say someone calls my cell phone. I can answer it, and if I'm Bluetooth connected for streaming, the sound of the person who's speaking on the phone goes right into my hearing aid. And that is good because it gives you a more direct sound, first of all, but also when it goes through the hearing aid, it's adjusted for your particular hearing loss. So it just can sometimes give people some more access to telephone needs. It's also just a great way recreationally to listen to audio. So if you're someone who really likes to listen to podcasts or music or anything like that, they basically can function like wireless headphones. So you can stream whatever you're listening to right through the hearing aids. So definitely talk with your provider about whether something with Bluetooth is appropriate. And I'm not going to get into this too much, but most hearing aids that have that Bluetooth connectivity have an app for the hearing aids. And this is mostly for people who are a little more tech savvy, perhaps, but you can customize how your hearing sounds. You know, you can get in there. I know I love my patients who are either current or former engineers. They love to get in there and tinker with the way things sound and make adjustments and things like that. And they love the ability to have these apps because they can go in and do that. And sometimes by having the smartphone app, your provider might be able to do remote adjustments, which means you don't necessarily have to go into the office to have adjustments made by your hearing care provider to your hearing aids. And then the last few things I'm going to have you consider about traditional hearing aids are other supplemental features. We call these hearable hearing aids. There's a lot of cool technology built into hearing aids these days. Sometimes we want to think of hearing as overall health. Okay, so there's the ability for the hearing aids to track your heart rate, how many steps you've made during the day, what kind of engagement you've had. There's also fall detection built into some hearing aids now. So if you are at a higher risk for falls, the hearing aid can detect whether you've made a falling motion, and you would set this up ahead of time, and you would have an emergency contact associated with it. So if the hearing aid detects that you have fallen and have not recovered within a certain amount of time, it can contact an emergency contact for you to say, Maybe it would text my spouse and say, Amy has fallen and has sent this alert. And then it just lets somebody know that is what has happened. So for your own safety. And there's some fun things like language translation, the hearing aids. You can speak with someone who's speaking a language other than the language that you speak. The phone will translate it, and then it'll send the translated sound and words right into your ears. So there's a lot of really kind of cool options out there that if you're someone who really likes all the bells and whistles, those are out there. Definitely not necessary for everybody. And then just a few more things to consider when you're considering prescription traditional hearing aids. You want to ask about the warranty. So most traditional hearing aids come with a 1 to 3 year warranty, just depending on which ones you choose. And a lot of them have an opportunity to be extended afterwards, which is great because if your hearing aids need to be repaired or you need to have a piece of them replaced, typically that's covered under warranty. Additionally, when you get fit with new hearing aids, New York State requires that you get a 45-day trial period, which means that you have 45 days to try your new hearing aids, at the end of which you'd make a decision to keep them, or you might perhaps decide to try a different one, or you can return them and have your money refunded to you. So just keeping in mind that there is a 45-day mandatory trial period. And so you should be talking with your provider about that as well. You want to be asking questions like, if I need help with my hearing aids, if I either need them adjusted or I need them repaired, do I have to just come back here? Can I go to other providers if I need to? Are the hearing aids, we call these locked hearing aids. So there are some places like Miracle Ear, some Costco hearing aids that are locked. So you cannot go to just any provider to have them adjusted. You have to go back to where you got them from. And that does not allow you a lot of flexibility. I find that this tends to be more of a problem for my patients who either cannot, it's harder for them to leave the immediate area. So, I have a lot of people come in, they've considered Costco hearing aids not a bad option, right? They can provide some great hearing aids for lower cost, but all of a sudden now, the closest Costco is Syracuse and they can't travel there anymore. They just don't have the ability to do that. And then they're stuck, right? Or maybe they spend some time in a different state during the colder months here. And then what that allows them to do is go to see a provider down there if needed. So that is, if that's going to be a concern for you, the need to possibly have to go to a different office or provider, make sure you're understanding whether that's an option. And then the last thing is, there's a lot of YouTube videos out there done by audiologists that talk about best practices, right? So you want somebody who does, and the reason I mentioned the YouTube videos is if you want to look up some of these things after, they're pretty interesting. But you want to make sure that you're going to someone who can give you a comprehensive hearing evaluation, that they go through your needs assessment. What are your individual needs? After you get the hearing aids, are they just taking your word for it and assuming things are fine? Or are they actually measuring and making sure that the hearing aids are functioning the way they should? Those are things called real ear measures or verification, or, is there validation happening to make sure that what you were hoping to get from your hearing aids are that you're actually getting them? So I could talk about those things for a long time, but I tried to give you a real snapshot of, if you're looking to get traditional prescription hearing aids, here are the categories you want to be sure that you're talking with the provider about. And here we come to the new stuff, the over-the-counter stuff. So at the very end of October 2021, the FDA finally released the proposed regulations of over-the-counter hearing aids. And I believe the last time I spoke to some of you, it was under public comment review, which means that the FDA put out, hey, this is what we're thinking of doing. And then they waited for comment back, and then they came up with their final regulations. So all of that was finally approved in August 2022. And in October 2022, this new category of over-the-counter hearing aids hit the shelves. So over-the-counter hearing aids means that you do not have to see a licensed hearing care provider to obtain these hearing aids. They're over the counter, they're available through retail outlets or perhaps online, and they do not require the need to see an audiologist. Now, that means that they also don't require an actual hearing evaluation to be done to purchase them. But the reason that these became an option is because, remember back, I said we'd return to this, that only a third of adults who could benefit from hearing aids use them. And when asked why, they said cost and access was a big one too. This is trying to remediate those issues. So we'll talk about cost in a minute, but trying to give people better access at and some hearing care at a lower cost. And so the rules that the FDA, oh, and the big thing here is, sorry, let me go back. Did I put it on here? Oh, I didn't. These are similar to traditional hearing aids in that they are actually hearing aids. They are regulated by the FDA. Okay. So these over-the-counter hearing aids are designed for individuals who are over 18 with perceived mild to moderate sensory neural hearing loss. The reason I kind of emphasized that word perceived is you don't require an actual diagnostic hearing evaluation to get this. And I'm being a little sarcastic about this because mild to moderate, those terms alone could mean very different things to different people. Someone might say my hearing loss is very mild and then go in and get their hearing actually evaluated, and it is much more significant than a mild loss. And we just know that people are not that great at actually guessing how significant their loss is. These over-the-counter hearing aids will use the same fundamental technology as traditional hearing aids, but they are probably going to have less features available. So fundamentally, the way that they're going to work is going to be similar. So it'll be, programmed sort of to address your hearing loss individually, but they probably aren't going to have all those different features that I just showed you for traditional aids. I already mentioned they are regulated by the FDA, but they are evaluated under a separate class, but they're still considered hearing aids. So they're less customizable, but they're possibly less expensive. Okay. So they might not have all those features and bells and whistles, but the cost is probably reflective of that. The last thing that you need to know about the over-the-counter is your hearing care professional is likely not going to be able to program these. It's up to you. So they are self-fitted, over-the-counter hearing aids. So if you get these, you are going to have to be the one responsible for adjusting them to fit your needs. Okay. So if some other questions that I want you to ask if you're considering over-the-counter hearing aids is, what happens if your hearing aids stop working, or you need help with them, or you're trying to adjust them and you're just not being successful, or one quits working? If you need help with the aids, how do you get that? So you need to make sure before choosing one that you know who you would contact. Is there information on the package that gives you access to a customer support person? How easy is it going to be? to be able to connect with them and understand what they're needing you to do. You want to check out the type of trial and return period. So I said with traditional aids, there's 45 days. What is it for the over the counter? So if you purchase that, can you return it? If you've worn them for 3 weeks and you decide they're not for you, make sure you're understanding what that is. Make sure you understand what kind of warranty it comes with. If you have a part that breaks or you need it repaired, what is that process? Do you need to send it to somebody? Will they fix it for you? For how long? Like what does the warranty look like? Certainly you're going to want to know what kind of functionalities it has, right? So what kind of features, how much can you customize it to your own individual hearing needs? Do you have to do that through a computer or a phone, or how are you going to adjust it or set it? Is it rechargeable, or does it need batteries? Does it have Bluetooth? Does it not? So you need to, all those some of those features I talked about with traditional, you're going to need to kind of investigate what they have available and how you access those features. And then I would highly encourage people to look for online reviews. Sometimes we know online reviews that it's usually the people who don't like something or are angry about something that tend to get on and review things rather than the people who are satisfied. So keep that in mind. But if you have an over-the-counter hearing aid you're thinking of getting, go see what are people saying about it. That's going to be your best bet right now because they have not been on the market that long. And so there's, it takes time for this feedback to trickle down to us as the professionals. So we might not have that feedback to give you yet, but see what other people are saying about it. Also, see not only about the hearing aid and how it works, but how easy is it for you to adjust for yourself? What kind of customer service have people gotten as they've needed it? So really making sure that you're investigating all of those things. And what people tend to be worried about is, what if you don't find benefit? What if you decide, okay, I'm going to dip my toe in the over-the-counter hearing aids water, and what happens if I'm not finding benefit or they're just not great? First, you're going to need to consider reasons why they might not be working well, or why you might not be finding benefit. Are they working? Are they just functioning, right? Is there something wrong? Are they broken? Are they fitted properly and providing adequate amplification? Do you have problems with adjusting or handling those devices? And once you kind of maybe pinpoint the reasons, your next steps in handling or mitigating that would be to contact their customer service, return them if you're allowed to, if you need to. And then you could consider going to see a hearing care professional who might be able to either help you pinpoint what the problem is. I can't guarantee that. Or they might say, this is not an appropriate device for you. It's time to consider traditional aids. I believe that Leslie if she didn't give it to you already, she's going to give you a copy of my handout or of my slides. And on this is this nice comparison chart here, where you have over-the-counter hearing aids and then prescription. So for over-the-counter, you can purchase them in store and online typically. For prescription hearing aids, you need to go to a hearing care professional to get them. Over-the-counter hearing aids are only for people who have mild to moderate hearing loss. Prescription aids, there's typically an aid out there for anybody who has any level of loss. But this is the big one. People want to know about this. How do prices compare? Right now, for the ones that are on the market, on average, they're costing around $1,600 a pair. But they can range as low as $200 up to $3,000. Okay, so there's a huge range. On average, about $1,600. For prescription hearing aids, they tend to average $4,600 for a pair. Remember though, when you purchase prescription hearing aids, you're often also purchasing years of professional access. So you oftentimes pay for your visits to the hearing care professional right up front in the cost of the hearing aids. So you don't have to pay every time you go into the office. So $4,600 a pair, but this I think is key. Many people don't realize a lot of hearing care professionals have hearing aids, traditional ones, available to you from around $1,000 a pair. Yes, they can range up to $6,000 or more. But if cost is a big concern, you can get traditional hearing aids for about the average price of an over-the-counter. Plus, you're getting all that professional service and help. For over-the-counter, there are no requirements before you purchase. Meaning you don't need to have a hearing evaluation. For prescription hearing aids, we do require having a hearing exam, getting a prescription, and getting them fitted. And the bonus is, in both categories, they're both regulated by the FDA. So they should all be actually have the capability to do what the companies claim that they do. So I personally, I'll kind of take off my here are the facts and tell you my personal opinion really quickly. I think there's a place for over-the-counter hearing aids. I don't think they're the boogeyman when it comes to my field or anything like that. I do think that there is a need for them for some people. Absolutely. I worry about the actual implementation of it. I worry about people missing medical contributions to their hearing loss. I worry that the hearing aids themselves won't be fit properly, either not getting enough sound or getting too much that it can cause damage. But now I'm going to go back to my factual thing. Well, I guess this is kind of a blend, right? So now that we've learned about what the over-the-counter hearing aids are and what you should be looking for, my recommendation is, if you would like to pursue over-the-counter hearing aids, that's wonderful. But I ask of you to continue getting your hearing evaluations at the very least by a hearing care professional, because then you know that your hearing health care piece of it really is being taken care of. You are making sure that you're not missing anything, that over-the-counter hearing aids are actually appropriate for you. And so you could go for your hearing evaluation, then get your over-the-counter, and then afterwards, you might be able to contact a hearing care professional and say, would you be able to check these and make sure that the sound I'm getting is appropriate for me? I cannot guarantee that all hearing care professionals are going to say, yeah, bring them in, let's check it out. Because the whole point of you getting over-the-counter is to keep the hearing care professional out of it. But, somewhere like our clinic up at Ithaca College, we don't charge for our services or anything. And we have the ability, I have some machines up there where we can put your hearing aid on and measure what it's doing and match it up to your hearing loss and your hearing needs to make sure that it's fit the proper way. Probably can't make any adjustments to the hearing aid to make them fit properly if they're not. That would be on you, since they're self-fitting hearing aids, but we can at least tell you, yeah, you're in the ballpark, or this is way over. You've got way too much sound going in there, or whatever the circumstances. Okay, so I went 6 minutes over, but we got started a little bit late. But hopefully they let you know that I was willing to stay until about 1/4 to answer questions. So I am going to end this. And now I can see everybody. I couldn't see everybody before. But I would love to open it up to answer questions. You could unmute yourself and answer questions, or you can use under reactions, you can raise your hand. That works also. I see Betsy with a hand up.
Okay. I just want to say that Amy did this talk, a similar, a different talk, but another talk for us last year. And as a result, both my husband and I made appointments and went up to Ithaca College, and it was great. I highly recommend it. It's run really well. The students are, are interesting and fun to engage with. And Amy oversaw the whole thing. So you're not getting, it's not like going to an 18-year-old dentist.
I appreciate that, Betsy. I also do want to say really quickly about that, because people usually do ask, can we come to the clinic? Right now, the answer is yes, our clinic is open for Ithaca community members to come to the clinic and have hearing evaluations. Two things though, we are very booked right now. In fact, I don't think we have anything available until the end of April. And that's going to be nearing the end of our semester. We do have a few different dates in the summertime up through June that we have appointments available. But if that is something you're considering, I would highly suggest that calling now to get scheduled. In the fall, we are going to be taking a hiatus from new patients that are not affiliated with the college, because what's happening is I love it. We're so busy. It's wonderful, but we are booked 2 and 3 months ahead at the most part. And that's just, I personally do not feel comfortable. I don't feel like that's good care, especially for anyone who needs to return for follow-ups. So just in the fall, we are taking a hiatus for new patients, but if you get in before that, you would be considered an established patient. So I just wanted to kind of put that information out there. Hey, John.
So one question that I have is that I have very small ear canals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard for me to find things that will fit in them properly.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any hearing aids that don't have to go into the canal, that are more like over the outside earbuds?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there are styles of hearing aids where the majority of it fits up here right behind the ear, but you still do need a piece that goes down into the ear to get the sound to travel. There are some special ones called bone conduction, but that really is only for a small population of people, but it could be an option for you. What it would do is it actually skips this part of the ear and it goes straight to sending the information through the bone to the inner ear. But have you, so there are options to get pieces on the end of the hearing aid that are molded to your individual ear canal size.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried that before?
I haven't tried that.
Okay, that's an option. Yeah, so you could get kind of what the traditional one is, and then your hearing care professional, they would take an impression of your individual ear and have a little mold made, and that goes on the end of the hearing aid so that it fits the shape and size of your individual ear.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Hi, Carol.
Hi, Amy, I saw you a number of years ago, and at that point, it was iffy whether I needed hearing aids or not. But for John, when I finally did get hearing aids 4 years ago, I had to try 3 different types of domes. And those are the little pieces on the end of the wire. And they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, but I have smaller ear canals too. And so my dome is fairly small, but my audiologist, who's Carol Bass, we were able to try these different ones and finally found one that worked. The other comment is that I didn't have a prescription, like from my doctor, for hearing aids. What do you mean by you need a prescription? In one of your slides, one of the requirements.
Yeah, it's basically a formal recommendation by a hearing care professional. It's just the terminology that they use kind of legally under the FDA for prescription. It's just that you get an evaluation and that a licensed hearing care professional is making the recommendation for you to get hearing aids.
Okay, well, it sounds like you need a prescription from your doctor.
I know. Well, actually,
not true.
But I will say that is semi-true. So in New York State, you are required to get medical clearance from a medical physician. And if you don't, if you have the option to waive that, but it is required of audiologists to tell you that it is in your best interest to get an evaluation and medical clearance from your physician. It's a New York state law. We are required to do it. And
Okay.
you have to sign something saying, I waive the need to get a medical evaluation. So I hope that happened.
I don't remember doing that.
Could have been,
at
it could have
all.
been part of your paperwork.
Yes, and I do have Bluetooth, and I want to emphasize it's connected to my cell phone, my hearing aids. It is very easy
Mhm.
to control the volume. I can get different directions. If I'm sitting across from someone in a restaurant, I can make mine directional just by a moment's look at and checking off or changing my hearing aid with my phone, and it's also connected to my car, and it rings in my hearing aids.
Mhm.
And so nobody else hears my phone ring, which is kind of nice. And so there's
Yeah.
so many features one can have.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that experience, Carol, because I do find that people who are considering the Bluetooth for the first time or using an app on the phone, it can be a little intimidating at first, but once you get it all set up, it really is quite easy to access for most people. Thank you for sharing that.
My audiologist set it up
Yeah.
with me at the time when I got my hearing aid. So it's super easy.
Great. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, I've had hearing aids for 5 or 6 years. I have 2 questions. Should you update your hearing aid? And the other thing is, should you be going back regularly to just have it tested? Because my audiologist, I assume she's an audiologist, has not required that. I
Yeah.
called them and said, do I need to come in? And they said, only if you have a problem.
No, those are great questions. To answer the first question about do I need to upgrade them, we usually say on average that hearing aids last about 5 to 7 years, or that's their lifespan. But that's only because sometimes after that amount of time, the technology, the computer pieces on the inside of the hearing aids start breaking down and needing frequent repairs. And if something like that happens, then it might be time to consider getting a newer, updated set of hearing aids. But if your hearing aids, if you're taking care of them and they're not breaking down and they're functioning well and you're getting benefit from them, I personally see no reason for you to need to upgrade them just because they're a certain age. I think that just thinking about how well are they working for you and do they have all the features you want? If yours don't have Bluetooth and you heard Carol and she says, this is awesome, you should get the ones with Bluetooth, and if you're starting to think, well, maybe it's
If they're
time.
if they're old, do they have Bluetooth? They probably don't.
No, it depends. It really does depend on the age. And they were
Well,
not,
when did Bluetooth start coming in?
yeah. So probably about, I feel like I've been in a time warp because of the last 2.5, 3 years. Let's see, it was probably about 6 years ago, 6 or 7, but at that time, not all hearing aids had Bluetooth. It was only a few select. And over time, it has become a much more common feature available in almost all of them.
And one other thing, I find that on Zooms, some people, it reverberates and it's not clear at all what they're saying. So I put my headset on and that corrects it. But so, and even on the TV, if somebody is remote, they're not in the studio, it's hazy. So
actually,
need to
well,
change?
yeah, I think you answered one of your own questions, which is what I was going to answer, is about going back, right? I think that's a perfect reason to go back and have adjustments made by your hearing care professional.
Okay.
Yep. So a lot of times once you finally get fit with your hearing aids and you feel like you're doing well with them, we usually say, you don't need to come back unless you have concerns with adjustments for the hearing aids. But you really should be having a hearing test annually.
Oh, really?
You really should be. Yeah, if you've got a hearing loss present, you really should be having a hearing test every year, or at the very least every 2 years.
But they don't suggest that.
That's my suggestion.
You're suggesting,
It's-
yeah.
Yeah, it's my suggestion.
Okay.
My focus is hearing health, right? So from a hearing health perspective, my suggestion would be to have a hearing test every 1 to 2 years if you know that you have hearing loss.
Okay.
Also, just regular visits with the hearing aids to bring them in, just have them checked and cleaned. There's gonna help with the longevity of the hearing aid too.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Barbara. Hi, June.
Hi. So are there any hearing aids that you don't have to take off at night? I would like to just have consistent hearing 24 hours a day. I really don't like that, dead space overnight.
Yeah. There is something, they're called extended wear hearing aids. You have to get them, usually, I don't even know anybody exactly in the area, but I can give you the name of what they're called, and then maybe you can do some investigating. They're called Lyric hearing aids, and you have to have them placed by a physician or an audiologist who's trained to do that. So you can't go to just any audiologist and get them. They're very specific ones, and they don't have all the features of traditional hearing aids, but they will provide some amplification. The cost is usually significantly more though.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi, Betsy.
You had mentioned that the more effort your hearing aids have to go to, the quicker the battery will die, when you were discussing the batteries versus, rechargeable. So for example, does that mean that if I were to use a hearing aid for listening to my books on Bluetooth, and I'm listening for like 4 hours, going about my business or
Yeah.
whatever, does that mean that so that would suggest that for someone like me who uses it a lot for listening to books, that batteries are the way to go, because you can pop them in
Yeah.
and replace them. Okay, I just
Yeah,
was
if you were
curious.
talking with me about that, asking,
Yeah.
if you're trying to figure out what hearing aids to get and things like
Right.
that, and you said I listen to audiobooks all the time, I'd say go for a traditional battery.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. I also personally am the kind of person, and it's honestly up to you what you end up choosing, but I prefer traditional batteries over rechargeable unless you have a really good reason to need rechargeable batteries. You can't access purchasing them, or you can't take on the added expense, or you can't physically handle changing batteries. I just think that they are more convenient. And they allow a little bit more flexibility. I've had 2 patients completely separate who have gone on vacation and left their hearing aid charger at home, and
Oh,
then they don't have their hearing aids for the rest of their trip, because it's not like you can pop into a store and just pick up the hearing aid charger. You have to get those with the hearing aids. So something else to consider. You always have to make sure you've got access to your charger if you need it. June.
So when you were talking about looking up reviews, what I
Mhm.
wondered about is there any kind of independent, well, I can't think of another word other than agency or some group
Mhm.
that evaluates hearing aids and compares them?
So a lot of people will automatically think of Consumer Reports.
Yeah.
I don't love the way that they do their hearing aid reviews. And the reason why is, for a lot of years, Costco was #1, which is fine. I have nothing against Costco, by the way, if people want to go somewhere like that to get their aids. The problem is, what they didn't tell people is that the hearing aids Costco are selling are major manufacturers' hearing aids. So what they were doing is saying Costco is better than, I'm just going to pull a company out of my head, Phonak hearing aids. but the Costco hearing aids were phonak hearing aids. So it didn't quite make sense to me. So I didn't love that last major review, the way that they approached it. I wasn't scientifically happy with the way that they did their research. There are some audiologists who do have some reviews that you can find online that can give you pretty unbiased, some unbiased reviews. I'm actually going to look it up really quickly because I'll put a link in the chat here if you want that.
Right.
One of them is called Dr. Cliff. And he, even though he's an audiologist, he does not get paid or compensated to review any of the devices that he reviews.
Uh-huh.
And so you can go through his, and I like his videos too, because he goes into some of these topics as well. He doesn't just do reviews of devices. But let me go ahead and I'll put the,
Hi, I'm
oh,
Cliff Olson,
sorry, he
Doctor of
started talking as soon as I
Audiology.
clicked on it. All right, so that's in the chat now. So
Great,
that's
thank you.
Dr. Cliff, and you can kind of go through his videos there. And then there is another one done by an audiologist that also are not compensated for their reviews in any way, shape, or form. And this is called Hearing Tracker. And I'll also put a link to that in there.
That's great. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. And both of those people, I am in different like online professional forums with both of them. So, you know, I know who they are, if that makes sense. I don't know them personally, but I've seen other things that they've talked about. So I don't
Great,
think
that's
shady
perfect.
characters.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
One last question from
Sure,
me, Amy.
Betsy.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't mean one last question, but do you have any, this is probably more a question for Hank, who follows politics. When will Medicare cover hearing aids?
So that was part of the Build Back Better bill, which didn't pass sort of both branches of Congress. So yeah, I don't know what's happening with that right now. I haven't heard any updates ever since it did not. Now it passed the House and did not pass the Senate, I believe. So that's kind of where it ended. So there was legislation there. One thing to consider though, and this is actually what one of the things I talked about last time I was here. It is only going, even if something does end up passing in the language that they already have used, it would only be for people who have severe to profound hearing loss. So now we have over the counter for people who have mild to moderate, and we have maybe in the future Medicare coverage of severe to profound, which leaves the whole swath of people in the middle who are a majority of the people who need hearing aids. So I'm encouraged because I think we're taking steps in the right direction. They just seem to be incredibly slow steps right now. So I don't have updated information on that right now.
Amy,
Yes.
if you're part of the private part of Cornell, the endowed part of Cornell, and you have your health care benefits, you do get a benefit for your hearing aids up to, I think, $1,500 a hearing aid
Per year. Yep, exactly.
every 4 years.
Which is an incredible benefit. I mean, that is one of the best ones I've heard of.
But if
However,
you're retired at Cornell,
that's no longer true with Aetna Medicare Advantage.
right?
They don't cover hearing aids.
Yeah, I just have,
I think she's just talking about
Medicare and
private
Aetna.
insurance.
well, the private part of Cornell, not Aetna, just regular Aetna 80/20 benefit as a retiree.
All right, Carol. Carol, I said, even though it's your secondary because, you know, for,
Correct. Even
Okay.
though it's your secondary and Medicare is your primary.
right.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Well, yeah, and I will put our clinic information in the chat. Even though I said how we don't have a ton of appointments left. Right now up through the summer, but if you do want something before, you know, we stop taking new patients for a while. I don't know that that's a permanent change. We just have to catch up with the people. I mean, it's been since the pandemic. We had such an incredibly long waiting list that we are still a year and a half after returning to services, still really catching up on all these people who have waited to get in. So that temporary stopping of taking new patients not affiliated with the college is, we're going to start that in the fall. I can't say how long that will last. If you have been to our clinic within the last 6 years, we will continue seeing you. And if you are affiliated with Ithaca College, either by if you're a retiree or sometimes we haven't totally figured this part out, probably spouses of retirees as well.
Amy, one more quick question, and I just forgot what it was. Oh, how far out are you making appointments? So for example, if I knew I wanted to come in the fall, do I have to wait until August or September to call? Or
it's usually the best bet. We usually don't start scheduling for the fall semester until about a month or so ahead of time.
okay,
Yeah,
so
good. I
basically,
mean, if you
at
were to
the-
call before that and say, I want to get an evaluation in the fall, Norma, who's our clinic administrative
Right.
assistant, she keeps a running wait list for when we open it up for appointments. So you
Okay.
could do that if you wanted to call her and tell her that, but usually August is fine.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Amy.
Yes, thank
Thank
you
you.
all. Thanks for
Thank you.
having me.
It was
I'm
very
glad to
helpful.
see return people, but also some new faces too. So that's great. I
Yeah.
hope
Thank you very-
everybody stays safe in the snow and has a lovely weekend.
Oh,
You too.
You too.
I'm enjoying Carol's background here. It's so picturesque.
Yeah, it is.
It's way better. I just have exercise equipment behind me. So, all
Okay.
right. Well, everyone have a wonderful weekend. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye.
And thank you very much.